Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. By the clock, I see it's 2 o'clock, and we want to go ahead and get started. My name is Steve Reynolds. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Springfield, and I'll let my the presenter here today introduce herself as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Terry. I'm the service hydrologist at the National Weather Service in Springfield. I have been in that position for about 11 years now. And prior to that, I was in the forecaster ranks here, came here in 1998. And before that, I was in Oklahoma. So I've been with the Weather Service for quite a while in several different roles. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this presentation with you today.
And I look forward to it myself. This is just one of the series of webinars that we conducted at the National Weather Service in Springfield. Obviously, because of COVID, we have not been able to get out into the field and meet up personally with our partners. So we thought this webinar series would be a fantastic opportunity for us to re-engage and talk about a series of different events. Starting back on October the 7th, we looked at climatology. We even looked at tornadoes. You don't think about tornadoes during the wintertime. Today, we're going to talk about flooding in the wintertime. And then on November the 5th and November the 9th, we're going to turn gears a little bit, talk about snow, ice, blizzards, even snow squalls. That's something new. So with that said, Megan, go ahead and take us forward into your presentation. I do want to say this. We do have everybody muted, but I would like to emphasize we would like to get your questions. So looking at the GUI on the side of the GoToWebinar screen, you'll see an opportunity for you to ask those questions. I might respond to you back individually, or we might throw it over to Megan for a group response. But please go ahead and share your experiences, share your questions. And with that, Megan, take us away.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. I'd like to start off. Whoops. It doesn't seem to be wanting to work for me. Hang on, let's see if that works. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the December 2015 flood and look at the decision support services we did then and compare them to what we do today. Not a whole lot difference, but I think we have made some improvements. Before we get started, I have a poll for you, and I believe you should see it. Were you living in or visiting the Missouri Ozarks or Southeast Kansas during this event? So were you directly impacted? Do I need to open it?
Oh, you're good to go.
Let's see. Oh, okay. Getting some responses here. Great. And let's see. Okay.
Megan, I'll go ahead and close for you now that 93% of you have responded. Fantastic.
All right. Yep. So about 65% yes and 35% no. Awesome. So it kind of helps gauge where I need to maybe spend a little more time on the presentation there. So I'm going to arrow that over. And so this event occurred in late December of 2015, mainly focused on the 26th through the 28th. And I know these images look more like spring, but it was, right smack in the middle of our winter season. And we had all kinds of flash flooding. We had flash flooding. The lower right image is from Republic, Missouri. They got about 4 or 5 inches in a very short period of time. It led to flash flooding there at that Republic Ford car dealership. We had a lot of flooded low water crossings. There's an example there with the middle image. And we get those of almost every flood event, but obviously more numerous and unfortunately more deadly with this event. We also, the upper left is I-44. Flooding near Jerome from the Gasconade River, so big river flooding event. The lower left is a smaller creek called Bull Creek. It's a little bit northeast of Branson. Also had some rapid rises in flash flooding there. And the upper right image is actually from Lake of the Ozarks. There was some lakeside flooding also, and I'll get more into that also. But mainly I'm going to focus on, I want to give you some insight into prior to the event, what we were looking at, what we were thinking, what we were messaging. And then I'll go a little bit into warning operations, share a little bit of radar loop with you. We'll discuss some of the challenges and the successes that we had with this event. And again, some of the changes that we've incorporated since that event. And then if you guys want, we can have some further discussion on how the event worked. So I'm gonna set the stage a little bit. So we're about 3 to 6 days prior, and we've had several heavy rain events. So the image on the left shows rainfall from the month of November, and pretty widespread, 7 to 9 inches across our area. Springfield's kind of there in the middle. I don't know if you can see my cursor right there. So about 4 to 5 inches above normal. So we're pretty soaked in. And then about a week and a half prior to our event, we had another big rainfall event, widespread 1.5 to 2.5 inches, little band of 2.5 near the Oklahoma-Kansas border. So looking at our soil saturation, and we get this image from a program called Flash, but basically it incorporates rainfall from radar and then converts it into soil moisture. And we notice in this little area, Springfield shows up as a bit of a hole, but that is more of a reflection of the actual radar itself. So you could just kind of broad brush the yellow over that green there. So pretty much the area is at least 75% saturated. Southeast of Springfield, even more saturated. We're seeing some even 95% saturation southeast of Springfield. So unusually saturated. So that's what we're seeing at ground level. Then we start looking at our forecast models. So the upper images are about 30,000 feet up, or what we call 500 millibar level. And the lower images are surface analyses and forecasts. So what we're seeing for the period of December 26th through the 28th is a rather deep upper level trough. You see by this dip here in the westerlies, way out west. And you typically will get active weather east of that feature. So on the 26th, we're east of that feature. So we're getting disturbances. Still coming at us on the 27th. And even still just a little bit south and west, and actually negatively tilted, which is also kind of a pattern recognition of potential for severe weather. So we're not only looking at heavy rain, some potentially severe weather too. And then at the surface, our surface analyses are showing, convergence anywhere there's a low or a front. You're converging all of that moisture coming up from the Gulf and lifting it up, condensing it out, and it just is going to potentially dump a lot of water over our area. So we're starting to see these signals, and we begin ramping up our messaging to core partners around the 22nd. We're sending out situation reports. Those do go on the web. They did go on the web also, but the main focus here was for our core partners to get them alert and aware that that we're seeing something coming. It wasn't a total lock that far ahead, but we're seeing the signals. And then on the 23rd, we've seen enough and have enough confidence that we go ahead and hold a conference call. So we did this with emergency managers. Actually, I didn't include SEMA here, but we did include SEMA on those calls. River forecast centers and Corps of Engineers and USGS. And we talked about what we were seeing as far as the saturated soils. We're seeing higher stream flow, and we're having high confidence in these forecasted rainfall amounts because they keep appearing every time we look at a model run. So So here's a sample of a couple situation reports starting on the 22nd. And a couple of things I wanted to draw your attention to. First is that we are mentioning severe weather also in our situation reports, but we start sneaking in this elevated risk of flooding. And I believe this was on the 22nd. So, you know, we got some graphics, awful lot of words, and we kind of fine tune that a little bit, as you'll see later. But just want to get the information out that, hey, we're seeing some widespread 4 to 5 inches of rain. Could be locally higher in some areas, 7 to 8 inches. But then as we get into the 24th and even the 26th, notice how we went from elevated to significant, and, you know, still carrying those high forecast rainfall amounts, and then eventually significant. So everything just keeps increasing and increasing. So, and before I get into conference calls, I have one more poll question I wanted to throw at you. And I wanted to see how many of you have been on either one of our conference calls or another National Weather Service conference call. So Steve, can you get that poll up?
Deacon, it is. We've had just about 3/4 of the attendees respond.
Okay. I can see it a little bit. Yes. Okay. So about the same percentage there. Awesome. Okay. That's good to know. And I think for the most part, people get a lot out of the conference calls. And, you know, it's just a good opportunity for us to talk things out with emergency managers and core partners. And I just have a sampling of some of the things that we'll share on those conference calls. River forecast centers will put graphics out and information on contingencies. So with the contingencies, what we're looking at is you have a certain amount of rainfall you're forecasting. You know, what if you give yourself a little buffer, high and low end? What's maybe not the worst possible, but, you know, but maybe, yeah, worst possible flooding that you could see. And even in the Arkansas Basin River Forecast Center contingencies, and this is, I believe, 3 days ahead, we're already seeing some trends toward major flooding or flood of record in our basins here in Southwest Missouri. So again, we definitely wanted to share that information. Also, the river forecast centers generate a product called flash flood guidance, gridded flash flood guidance. And what this product tells us is, given a certain amount of rain in a certain period of time, how much rain would it take to start flooding small streams? So, and I just have a sample here of the 6 hour, whoops, back up, 6 hour flash flood guidance showing, anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 inches in 6 hours would produce flash flooding. And we have a site specific model that we can run locally for, you know, not all of the river gauges in our area are forecast points, but some that contribute to forecast points, you know, we have in our system, and we can model out, say, hey, given so much rain, and I put the rainfall up in the top, what is that expected to do to the river as far as the level? And then that green line is the level. So, and we were seeing this with almost all of our river forecast points, looking at the contingencies, even looking at the base information, and seeing that the flooding potential was getting high. So now we're looking at about T- 2 days out. Our confidence is still pretty high. We've had our calls, and it's time to issue flash flood watch. So we do that on the 24th, mainly for Southwest, South Central Missouri. And then based on model trends, we went ahead and expanded the watch to the rest of the county warning area, our forecast area, which is mainly Southwest, South Central, and part of Central Missouri and Southeast Kansas. And we're also coordinating with our neighboring offices. As you'll see in a little bit, this event was not exclusively ours. There were other forecast offices impacted. But, in addition to our regular duties, we're generating graphics and putting out more situation reports and other text products. So, okay, let's get to the day of. This is the morning of the 26th. And, we do, most of we do radio sawn launches at our office. And so it's a weather instrument that we launch up twice a day, and we get readings of temperature, dew point, winds, humidity, pressure, and get that data, and then indices are generated from that. There was one in particular that caught our attention, and that is this PW equals 1.23. PW stands for precipitable water. So it's saying in the air mass over your area, if you squeezed all the water out, you'd get that much rain. Which it doesn't sound like all that much, 1.23. But if you look at it from a climate perspective, it's quite high. So the black line here is what we normally see for precipitable water in December. And that star is where we were on that day. The max for that day was 1.03. And we're exceeding that by 0.2 of an inch. So it's really just another weighing factor for, yes, you have an exceptional event that could potentially happen. So, and I'm going to try and get this loop to work. Steve, if you could just holler at me and let me know if it's working. But it is a 3-hour radar loop for the 2 days starting from the morning of the 26th to, I believe, the evening of the 27th. Yeah. So it'll loop, and you can just see the whole time there's rain over us. And the yellow and the orange, that's higher intensity of rain. So we just pretty much had a lot of heavy rain over us for 2 days. But all total, we issued 18 flash flood warnings. And of those, 2 of those were flash flood emergencies. We issued 25 what we call aerial flood warnings, and that's just after you get the rainfall, but you still have a lot of runoff, and you're still having impacts from it. You need to have warning out on it. So we had those aerial flood warnings, and we had 16 river flood warnings. And at that time, we only had 19 river flood forecast points. So almost all of our river points are forecasted to go into flood. And I have to say, the river forecast centers were really on board too. They got those forecasts, out for us early. So I don't think there were that many surprises with respect to river flooding. But, on top of that, and I'm going to close that radar loop now, you see the green boxes are the flash flood warnings, but the little boxes are the river floods. So we have these little river flood warnings embedded within the larger flash flood warnings. And we also had some severe weather. So we had some yellow here is severe thunderstorm warnings, and red are tornado warnings. So just a crazy couple of days. And I keep doing that. Apologize. So I went ahead and included that warning image on your upper left and all of the reports that came in from the 26th and the 27th, and expanded it outside of our area just to show that, again, it wasn't just isolated to us. It was a pretty widespread event. Had just about every kind of severe weather. I mean, the green boxes are flash flood warnings. The numbers are rainfall amounts. The red, those are tornadoes. The yellow with the tree blowing, that's wind. Hail in the purple. Even had a little bit of ice showing up on the backside of the system. And so it just had a lot of moisture and really packed a punch. And I'll be discussing the impacts here in just a second, but just wanted to go over all of the situational reports that we issued for this event, starting from the 22nd and going through the 28th. And just noting that before the event, we were issuing 2 to 3 a day, but we were increasing the intensity, going from mentioned to limited to elevated to significant. So I think we were really pretty spot on with the trend. I think the impacts lasted a little bit longer, so we bumped up the number of situation reports that we were doing for the event, from 2 to 3 to 5 to 6. I think our communication was good with our partners during the event. We had NWS chat back then, and so we could discuss within the chat room, have everybody see it. Anytime we shoot a text product, it's hyperlinked in there, so you could just go on and click and see that. And social media, in addition to posting some of the situational report type graphics, we were able to post these really nice safety messaging graphics, which I think helped. So the rainfall accumulation for this event, you'll see a nice band of 8 to 10 inches, roughly along I-44, and it dips a little bit south of I-44 into northeast Oklahoma and northwest Arkansas there. And then I have these dots to delineate where fatalities occurred for this event. So we have 2 locations in Pulaski County. Unfortunately, there were 7 total. Reports in Dallas, Greene, Polk County, down in Lawrence County, had 1 in Jasper County, actually at one of our river forecast points, Waco. And then later in the event with the residual flooding, had a couple of fatalities, 1 in southeast Kansas, there in Bourbon County, and 1 in Vernon. So just looking at the list of the fatalities, and I think most of you may have been on our webinar 2 weeks ago, and we talked about how we get a lot of our severe weather at night. And unfortunately, we got a lot of our flash flooding fatalities at night also. So again, shorter days, longer night, longer opportunity for that. And there are those multiple deaths in Pulaski County. This was the 5 soldiers from Fort Leonard Wood who the car went into a low water crossing. And then another one pretty close to that in Swedberg, where a couple got washed away in a low water crossing. But even after the flash flood, most of the flash flooding occurred on the 26th. Then we had continual rain and flooding through the 28th. And so we had more of our residual flooding, and unfortunately a few fatalities there. Some of you may have seen these images from MoDOT. They put a little icon there wherever a road is closed due to flooding. And this is a snapshot from the 27th. And these are only state routes and state highways. If we put low water crossings and county routes on here that were flooded, you'd probably barely be able to see them at. But suffice to say, hundreds of low water crossings were underwater. And you may notice too, if you look up north where it's all blue and purple, the winter weather wasn't that far away. And it did get quite cold too after this event. Swiftwater rescues, over 70 just in Greene and Webster counties. Springfield is in Greene County, Marshfield in Webster County. So over 100 statewide. And again, unfortunately, most of those were successful, but unfortunately, they were not all successful.
Hey, Megan?
Yeah, yes.
We had
Yes.
a question come in on a term that you used a little bit ago that I'd like you to take another look at, and that was the emergency. Can you kind of relate the difference between a normal flash flood warning and one in which we would issue a flash flood emergency?
Yeah, I'll talk. In fact, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more toward the end, but for now, I'll just say back then, in 2015, we'd issue a flash flood warning when we were reaching those thresholds, getting too much rain and getting too much runoff and things started flooding. But then you start getting reports of multiple swiftwater rescues, people being evacuated from their homes. It just gets to be another level of flash flooding. And those are the kind of reports that would prompt us to issue a flash flood emergency. And at least now we have a little more of a stair-step approach to that, rather than just going from the base flash flood to the flash flood emergency. But does that clear it up a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to rivers. And most of you are probably familiar with our the rivers and lakes section of our webpage. We call it, we love our acronyms. This is AHIPS, AHPS, Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Services. And so if you're on our website, or any weather service website, and you see the rivers and lakes tab, you click on it, you'll get an image of our area with some usually green icons. And when green would indicate no flooding. But when they start getting colorful, when they start getting yellow with approaching flood stage, and orange in minor flood stage, but here we see reds and purples too, and that's an indication of moderate and major flooding. But the neat thing about the page is if you can just hover over one of the points and you will automatically see the hydrograph, which shows what level the river is at the certain time. And for any of those points that are circle or squared, you'll see a forecast too, especially if they're going to be in flood. So let's take a closer look at a few of the points that really went crazy. The Spring River near Baxter Springs. So the Spring River starts in Lawrence County and kind of flows westward, north of Joplin, and then cuts south towards Baxter Springs. And notice on the 26th, once the rain started, how rapidly it shoots up. I mean, within half a day or so, it's already in moderate, and it just keeps going. But anything here in the blue, is past observations. And then the vertical line here is current time. And then anything over to the right side, usually in 6-hour increments, that would be your forecast levels. So again, this particular one, and actually this was a record stage for Baxter. They went up to almost 32 feet. And then just a couple more, Shoal Creek near Joplin. And this was also a record crest of 23.4 feet. But again, just noting how quickly it rose. So recall that we were so saturated. So, any rain we got was going to cause a response because of the runoff, but getting so much rain, it just, leveled out and then shot back up again. And Jerome on the Gasconade River, Phelps County, more on the east side of our area of responsibility. It's a larger drainage area, so it's going to take a little bit longer to respond than most of our other streams. But notice it goes just from 4 feet on the 26th to 31, almost 31 and a half feet in 3 days. Just incredible volume of water going through that system. And here's the listing of all the locations that crested above flood stage. And again, it was 16. And the ones with the asterisks, those are the records that are still standing today at Joplin and Baxter Springs. Any questions about the rivers?
Haven't had any questions, though. I'll bring up a couple of real quick stories. Dan Scoff down in Northwest Arkansas mentioned that the record crest for the Illinois River near Watts was reached at nearly 30 feet. And then less than 2 years later, that record was broken on April 30th, 2017.
Yep. And, up to that time, there there were 3 or 4 sites that were record, but because of the 17 floods, a couple of those records got broken, even up here. But yeah, boy, that spring 2017 may be topic for another webinar sometime in the future. It's also a doozy of an
Uh,
event. Go ahead.
Hey, Megan, Dan did also follow up and ask, is there a way to get archived river crests from AHIPS?
The graphic or just the listing? Because if you want the graphic, the answer would be no. But for Watts is a forecast point, there should be a listing. If you click on that point and scroll down a little bit, there should be a listing of crest, and it can be with respect to historic or from current time. So that's a nice little feature. But if you are looking for the actual hydrograph, I would recommend going to the USGS website, and you can get some hydrographs there.
And I also have another one from Lisa Bryson. Does the National Weather Service give the order for when the dams are opened, or do the dams and reservoirs use their own judgment?
Actually, yeah, that is up to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and that actually leads in pretty good to my slide here. So the way that works is, we'll coordinate with the Corps of Engineers when we're expecting heavy rains, and they'll call. We call back and forth and talk to each other. But yeah, the ultimate decision to open floodgates is with the Corps of Engineers on Table Rock, Beaver, all the chain along the White River. Now we do have an exception in our area, Lake of the Ozarks. That is handled by Ameren, and they have their engineers there at Bagnell Dam. But they do work very closely with Truman Lake, which is upstream. So, and I know they're gonna base their calculations and their releases on what has fallen. They may be able to do a little bit of minor releases ahead of time, but what they do is law. So, if there was some issue with that, it goes to Congress, and we are not involved with that. But like I said, we coordinate with them very closely on rainfall, and we give them data, and we're always watching. But I have to give a shout out to them. For the most part, their calculations are amazing. Once they have that water in there, and they're looking at the inflows and the outflows, and it's pretty impressive. But during this event here, like I said, we were coordinating with them in conference calls also. But Table Rock did have a record release of 72,000 cubic feet per second, and they're going to open those gates when the inflow, if they had no outflow and only had inflow, if it exceeds the capacity of the lake, then that's when they're going to open those gates. So again, they opened them here 72,000 cubic feet per second. But Beaver and Table Rock, it both exceeded their designated flood pools. They do have surplus pools above that. So the top of the flood pool is not necessarily the top of the dam. In fact, you've got, maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 feet, depending on which lake you're on, of the surplus. But unfortunately, along Taneycomo, this image I have in the lower right. So yeah, you can kind of see where the channel is right here. That's where the water's supposed to be, and then over here where the water's not supposed to be. So they did have quite a bit of flooding. 120 homes inaccessible or flooded. And then the upper right there, that is from Lake of the Ozarks. So most of their flooding was above the dam at Lake of the Ozarks. But Bagnell, they keep that lake pretty high, and they had over 100,000 cubic feet per second that they had to release. And they also do have some help from Truman. Truman can hold back water for them because Lake of the Ozarks is much smaller than Truman. Truman can really hold a lot of water. So how rare was this event? I mean, of course, it's already rare because it's happening in late December, right? But if we look at it from a historical point of view, so there's this thing called NOAA Atlas 14. And they take what rainfall has occurred and through statistics determine what is the average recurrence interval for a 5-minute to a 60-day rainfall in terms of years. So I'm going to look at our rainfall. So we got 10 inches in 2 days. So I've got a little arrow going to 10. The 2-day line is the dark green here. So if you take that down to the recurrence interval, it's about 200 years. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're only going to see that event once every 200 years. But the recurrence interval, if you took the inverse of it, it would be the probability that you could see it in any year, and that would be 0.5%. So again, still a rare event. Okay, so I'm going to highlight some of the challenges with this event. Of course, it was a holiday weekend. We had a lot of people in our area that were not familiar with those places that may flood frequently, may just be mentally tuned out because it's the holiday season and we don't get floods during the holiday season, right? But being a rare event, you know, we had to look at how dramatic should we be with our messaging. You know, you don't want to cry wolf, but you don't want people to get caught by surprise either. So hindsight's 2020. We know now. You know, I think we did a pretty good job. We ramped it up. We got the trend right. Maybe the impacts a little longer, I think, than we expected them to be. And unfortunately, you know, with all the bigger impact flash flooding occurring at night, the fatalities were probably higher because of that. And I think some of our successes, again, the river flood warnings and working with the river forecast centers, we had forecasts out well ahead of time. And, you know, there may have been some balancing if it was too high or too low, but that flood forecast was already out there. I think we had good collaboration with our partners, emergency managers, media, SEMA, USGS, and the Corps. River forecast centers, again, can't say enough about them. And again, overall, I think the models did a good job too. We didn't really get caught by surprise, you know, model-wise that this was going to be a heavy rain event. So fast forward 5 years, and how do we handle, remember I talked about the flash flood emergency versus the regular flash flood warning. Well, now I think since fall of last year, so we've been doing this about a year now, we're using what's called impact-based flash flood warnings. So the way this works is, I guess, threefold. First, you have a degree of intensity of the flooding. So a base flash flood warning is, you know, you're exceeding your flash flood guidance, you're getting heavy rain, you're getting runoff, you're getting some flood reports. Let's go with the flash flood warning. And we can explicitly say with our hazard source and impact information, you know, flash flood warning, it's life-threatening, caused by thunderstorms. We can give a source. It could be radar-based, it could be observations, emergency management, list that right there. And then the impact is tied to the type of warning that we issued. So for a base flash flood warning, it would say more like low-lying areas will be impacted. So if things get a little more impactful, we can go with what's called a considerable tag. So when we put a considerable tag in there, you know, maybe it's not quite people being rescued off their roofs yet, but it's kind of getting there. We'll go with a considerable tag. And when we do that, the impact information will automatically kind of ramp up also, as well as the hazard. The sources, again, we can include all the sources that we need there. But then if we go considerable, and even we go catastrophic, which is the flash flood emergency, we'll get an extra tag here at the bottom of our flash flood product. So going from base, which is, yeah, you're starting to have some flash flooding and it's good, you know, it's dangerous, could have an impact, to, you know, you're starting to get some highways go under now, and then eventually, if it keeps going, it's the you know, hundreds of swift water rescues, people being pulled off their roofs. That's when you go with the emergency. And then here's a sample of it that I included. So it would say flash flood damage threat here on the bottom tag is catastrophic. And just want to do a quick comparison of these products side by side. So here's one on the left from 2015 and compared to one that we did earlier this year. So the top part's pretty much the same. We keep the bulletin, we keep the EAS activation, listing out the counties, put the time, a brief description, but then we parse out the hazard source and impact information. So you can just look right at the product and see it real quick. Instead of it's kind of embedded in here. There's some mention of what's going to be impacted. We'll have a low water crossing listing. But then again, we'll have tags at the bottom of our impact-based warnings, and we only have flash flood damage threat if it's considerable or catastrophic. If it's a base warning, you will not see that tag. I'm going to talk a little bit about our situation reports. You know, I think these have been a huge success, even back when we were using them before this event, during this event, and after. But I think we've made some good enhancements. Really, you know, using the bullet format, using bigger, you know, more pictures, less words. You know, on the left, this one from 2015, it's pretty wordy. You kind of have to dig a little bit to get what you want. How much rain's going to fall? You know, what's going to be impacted? Where here, it's just bam, bam, bam on the bullets. So I think that, like I said, that's a nice enhancement. And then the last enhancement I want to bring up just is, we used to do these things called multimedia briefings. And we were doing them, I believe, before 2015. And they were nice, but you just using the software in general was kind of complicated, and we could only record them and then send them out. The Facebook Live software is really nice now, and you know, during a big event, we can just pop right on there and start talking live and take questions. I tell you what, I admit that I think the younger folks at the office are a little better at it than some of us older folks. But you know, we can learn too, and you can still, you know, save the recordings and post them up. But like I said, I think the video software in general has gotten a little more friendly. And, you know, after this event, it's a high impact with all the fatalities and the low water crossings, flooded. We did do some after action reviews internally. We did do some special coordination with our partners, you know, help with enhancements on, you know, getting the information out about lake releases and things like that. I mean, we'll do most of that. You know, if they're doing high releases, we've got to get a warning out. But you know, we can help make sure the message is consistent between the Corps and us and the public. So I think that's about all I have. Just if we go through another one of these events, and you know, eventually we will, plenty of ways to get us the information. I would say even, you know, even though we're getting a lot of these bigger events at night, it's hard to get the information in real time. But I think the social media has helped quite a bit. All right, I think that is all I have. Are there any other questions or anybody want to discuss? Yeah, go ahead.
You brought up a couple points that came up from several of the attendees. When we asked them through chat, what would you guys do several days in advance leading up to this type of event? Many people mentioned social media in particular, and that is such a fantastic opportunity. One of the things on the slide that Megan has up there, become a Weather Ready Nation ambassador today. Social media is one of the terrific ways that we can leverage our partnership with you all to let the public know what's coming. And one of the things that the social scientists have been very clear on, if we provide a consistent message from multiple credible sources, and whether it be Dade County 911 or Patty with Skywarn, you both mentioned using social media. Obviously the TV and the radio folks are doing the same thing. So that is one of the things from an ambassador standpoint. If you don't know what being a Weather Ready Nation ambassador is all about, please Google it or give me a call or contact us at any one of these points of contact, and we'll let you know about that. The second thing, Megan, I'd like to unmute Ted Martin. Of course, those of you who know Ted, he is the fire chief and emergency management director down in Branson. And Ted, I think you are free to go if you'd like to unmute yourself. Ted had a very interesting point when it came to this type of an event over the Christmas period in particular. So Ted, go ahead.
Let's make sure I have a microphone working. Do you hear anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Hey, one of the things that we learned in the prior events was to build a solid PIO group, the public information position in the incident management system. And so it was more than a one-person role. It brought in more partners, not just the City of Branson, but the Corps of Engineers, the National Weather Service, City of Branson, the Chamber of Commerce, because we're obviously a tourism-based industry, and a few others. So I was getting overwhelmed as the incident commander, or operating our EOC rather, for getting good information out that, yes, this is happening, here's what we're doing, Branson remains open for business, which is a key phrase. And all of the PIO staff, including their leaders, were pretty much out of town for vacation for the holiday. So it's a good time to be thinking about succession planning, to be mindful of who's in town, who's not in town, know your incident management system so you know if the PIO position is not fulfilled, that means the incident commander has to pick it up so you can do good, adequate messaging for your community. So we use those tools. At the local level, we use a program called Everbridge. We call it locally Branson Alerts, where we can provide instant text messaging, emailing, phone calls downstream of Table Rock Dam, and then to work into local media. And of course, we were getting national media exposure as well. That's where we really needed the PIOs. So it doesn't matter what position it is, if it's planning or logistics or finance, to be mindful of, hey, who's around this Veterans Day, this Thanksgiving, this Christmas holiday, as you fulfill your EOC positions.
That is great food for thought there, Ted. Yeah, just being prepared. Yeah, being in our region, you just never know. Weekends, holidays, or fair game for big events.
I think my comments froze Steve up. Sorry.
Steve,
Yeah,
are you still on
give me
there?
an opportunity to think about stuff. Can you hear me now? Okay. Ted, a follow-up question for you. Dan Scoff had asked if the emergency release spillway at Table Rock had been utilized in any of the recent record release.
Have they been used? Is that what your question was?
Yes.
Sorry. No, a little known secret is my retirement papers are based on that release. So the record flow that Megan gave was 72,000, I believe, on that weekend. And the main structure, the 10 gates, are capable of 500,000 gallons of water or cubic feet of water per second. And the auxiliary gates are another 500,000. So that is really designed for, it's a really bad day in Tenney County, Stone County when it happens. So we had a lot of room to grow within the actual structure. And actually, if I understand it correctly, the auxiliary spill gates are really to protect the infrastructure or the integrity of the main dam.
Okay, thank you, Ted. And then Scott Halen remarked when Megan, when you're talking about the low water crossings and in and around Springfield in particular, that he was part of the Willard fire for this event and believed that the department had 5 or so water rescues. One of my memories was it's not too far from that, and it may have been the same spot that Scott's referring to. Responders going to the flooding on Wilson's Creek there near Springfield Farm, they would rescue somebody, pack up and leave, and only to have to come back to the exact same low water crossing several times and rescue people. So that was a very remarkable event.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. I know that the fatality that occurred in Jasper County at Waco, they were actually rescuing someone there when another person drove in. So I totally get your frustration. Not exactly sure what the solution is, but hopefully we can keep working toward that.
And it is something from the social media side. It's something that, as Ted mentioned, from the public information officer side of things, just continuously to provide information in a consistent manner from multiple sources over the level of threat seems to really pay off. And I do appreciate, we had 30 to 40 of our partners on the call today. Megan, thank you for doing an excellent job. It's this type of information that we really need your help in trying to portray just what is the level of threat, what is the impact from these events. And by doing group messaging, by providing consistent messaging that says just how bad things are, that is the way that the social scientists have clearly stated is the way in which we can stop these people from going into low water crossings. We're never going to mitigate the storm totally, but by working together as ambassadors, as partners, we do have that opportunity. So, Megan, I'll give you a chance for the closing words to the webinar. I should say this, though. I'm sorry, Megan. If there is anybody who would like to ask any questions, you can raise your hand in that GUI or go ahead and type in your final question, and we'll be glad to answer it. So with that said, Megan, any closing words?
Not just thank you for attending. It was nice to go back and look through this event. We're almost at the 5-year anniversary, and I worked through most of it. I think you did too, Steve. Yeah, it was just, I just remember the night of the 26th. It was just insanity at the office. It was so busy and so crazy, but we were getting really good information through the chat and through social media, and that it just helps so much. Make sure we're messaging things correctly when we get good information. So thanks for all who pitch in there.